An ever-increasing amount of our important communications takes place in messaging services, even at work. So whether Slack or Teams, these services are across the board being scrutinized for their privacy and data sovereignty practices. To take the worry out of this, GleSYS wanted me to bring you a guide to setting up a self-hosted, open source alternative to common team chat services. I'm Lars Wikman, and this is Underjord. Thanks to GleSYS for their commitment to bringing these guides to the public and lowering the barriers to running your own services. The service today is Team Chat, and we will be installing a mature open source competitor styled very much in the vein of Slack. It is called Mattermost. I want to take a quick aside. If you've heard of GitHub, you might have heard of GitLab. GitLab is the open source competitor, the biggest open source competitor to GitHub. And GitLab has for the longest time been significantly more featureful than GitHub. Maybe not as approachable, maybe not as simple, but more featureful for sure. Mattermost strikes me as similar. It entirely unexpectedly had the feature boards, which includes a Trello-style Kanban board with a lot of functionality. It seems well featured, and it includes something called playbooks, which I thought was quite novel, which are essentially to-do list workflows for company processes, such as incident response or employee onboarding. It seems like an interesting feature, especially if you want to run your company from your team chat. And that's a fairly popular thing to do these days. The installation process is quite smooth in my opinion. I opted for the binary-only approach. Since Mattermost is built in the Go programming language, it can ship as a single tight binary with no external dependencies aside from the database. And that makes it pretty convenient in my opinion. There is also a Docker variant that you can use, and I imagine it's similarly smooth. And if you operate a number of other containers, that might be preferable in that case. But we're going to do the binary approach. As far as I've gone, the Mattermost docs have been quite good. They've been informative and helpful. To bring in HTTPS, I decided to try something new. I wanted to try a heavily recommended option called Caddy. This is another web server that can be run as reverse proxy and provide the same functionality as you would get from Nginx plus Certbot. So that will bring us TLS, SSL, whatever you want to call it. To summarize, the plan is to set up a virtual private server with Ubuntu in the GleSYS cloud. Then we take that IP address, we point a domain to it, we finish the setup and installation of the server, we install the database, we install Mattermost, and then we configure Mattermost. Once we know it's working, we set it up for automatic starting and stopping with systemd. Then we set up Caddy to provide HTTPS. Let's get to it. So we're here in the GleSYS Cloud UI. We want to create a server. So we go to servers. We go to create, the big green button. Makes sense. KVM should be good. Ubuntu, yeah, a long-term supported release. That seems good to me. I like to put my nodes in Falkenberg, which is quite near where I am. So if I really want to, I can go over there and ask to see my virtual server. I don't think they can actually show me my virtual server, but still I can go there and ask. For you, you might want to put it in Finland or in Stockholm. All right, I'm gonna use comms.cloudcorrect.eu for my host name. I like to put the domain name as my host name if I am going to use a single domain for the node. And in this case, it makes sense. Username. So these authorization credentials, you probably want to use the username Lars as well because it's a very good name. As for password, generate your own. I don't want you stealing mine. Get your own password. And I'm just going to paste that somewhere else, usually a password manager, so I have it when I need to sudo or if there's trouble with logging with the SSH key. So you can add your public SSH key so you don't have to use the password to get into the server. Let's do that. I have a few pre-filled that I can use, so I'll just put that one in there. We get an IP address and we get an IPv6 address. I'm going to be dealing with the 4, but you get a 6 as well, which is good. There are backup options. I'm not going to use any of these because the server will not survive the day. I will tear it down after this. But if I was going for a longer time, backups would make sense. This is one way to do it. Good thing to offer. Now, resources. Mattermost claims that you can run up to 1,000 users on 1 CPU core and 2 gigs of RAM. That's not how I would do it. It might be fine. It might be decent. 2 cores, 2 gigs, probably fine. I'll just give it 4 cores and 4 gigs because I want some headroom and I don't mind paying for it during this short demo. It might also speed up installs and stuff. But yeah, Mattermost is not particularly resource intensive, which is good, or at least they claim not to be. I'll post a link to the requirements in the description. We create the server. While it's creating, grab the IP address. We go over to my domain host. I'm using Gandhi, but you can use any you like. I think even GleSYS even offers their own. And I want to make an A record for comms.cloudcorrect.eu, and I'll add this IP address. So let's see if the server is up. Yes, it's up. It's green. So now we should be able to SSH into it with the credentials we added. So in the terminal, we should be able to say SSH Lars, assuming you named yourself Lars, at comms.cloudcorrect.eu. And with a bit of luck, SSH should ask us for a fingerprint. So yes, and we're in. So this used the SSH key that I configured. We are on a Debian-derived distribution called Ubuntu. So we have apt as our package manager. Apt likes it if we update the package cache and upgrade all packages to a recent version. So that's where we're gonna start. And this is where it's convenient to be able to paste the password over and over again. We're gonna do a few of these sudo commands throughout. So we've updated and we upgrade. You can get questions like this, which services should be restarted. With a new server, it doesn't really matter. Let's just go ahead, okay. You might want to be more mindful if you have something running in production, which is sensitive. Next, we can install the database. Mattermost supports PostgreSQL and MySQL. I really prefer PostgreSQL, so that's what we're going to go with. And we can just get that from apt. Another question about services. With Postgres installed, we also need to set up a database user, a database in the database system, and grant access for that user to that database. And we will be setting these up for the purpose of running Mattermost. To get into the database, the easiest way is to sudo ask the Postgres user and run the command psql. In here, we create the database. And we create the user and their password. You should probably use randomly generated, more serious password. And then we grant the necessary privileges for the database to the user. That should be good to go. And now it's time to install Mattermost itself. This is entirely from Mattermost's documentation, so I'll link that in the description. You can follow along in the actual text, which can be a bit more easy to work with if you're doing this. I'm using specifically the binary approach, which means we need to download their tarball from their servers and set that up. So I found the link to the latest tarball by going to mattermost.com/deploy. Currently, this is the latest one. We use wget. Then we unpack it. And we move it to a better place with sudo. We need to create a storage directory for files. Then we can add a system user and group for running Mattermost itself. We set that user and group as the owners of the Mattermost directory. Then we give write permissions to the Mattermost group. Now it's time to configure the database, and we need a text editor to do this. I would normally use Vim, but to make this more approachable for people that aren't necessarily comfortable with Vim, I'm gonna do my best in using Nano. Now, if you're comfortable with Vim, you already know what you're doing here, so use that instead, it's fine. We need to do this as the Mattermost user, so sudo u Mattermost. Then it's nano, the name of the editor we're using. And the config file. So here we have the editor. Now we want to find the database config, and there's a field called driver name there that we can go for. Driver name. So I use Control W to search. And here we see we're in SQL settings, so I think we're in the right place. So we change the user to Mattermost. We change the password to take the power back. And we change the database name to Mattermost. Control O and then enter writes the file. Control X exits. Now we can make sure that Mattermost runs successfully before we do anything else. So we go to the directory. And as the Mattermost user, we run bin/Mattermost. The log should indicate towards the end that it's running on port 8065. So let's check if that's true. So we go for comms.cloudcorrect.eu, whatever your domain you set up is. You could also use the IP address at this point. And then we go for the port that it's supposed to be listening on. And wouldn't you know it, there's the sign-up form for the service. For now, we go back to the terminal. To terminate the server for now, we press Control-C, which will interrupt the server. Server stopped. All good. This is a good time to set up a civilized automatic starting and stopping. And we'll use what the OS ships with just to keep dependencies down, and that is systemd. We can create the file with touch. So I'm editing it in Nano, but this is a pretty chunky piece of config, and you can just pull it straight from the documentation instead. So I'm gonna copy it, I'm gonna paste it. As you can see, it's not so much that you can't read it. It's just more that I cared to type. We write that, we exit. So now we want to ask systemd to read our new config file. Sudo system control daemon reload. Then we can check the status of our service. Loaded, inactive, dead. Very dramatic. So let's start it. Sudo system control start Mattermost service. And then sudo system control enable Mattermost service. And that should enable it for automatic startup. So this is a good time to switch back to our browser and make sure that the service went up again. So we should be able to refresh this. It should be up. Seems to be. Now let's get on with Caddy. I've shown Nginx with certbot in the past to provide HTTPS. Caddy sort of bakes them both together and is much more straightforward to configure, at least for the basic case. So we will need to run some commands for adding the Caddy keys and sources to apt, so we can use apt to install Caddy. You can find these commands in the Caddy documentation. Then we just need to update the apt caches and then install Caddy. Seems to be going great. Now we can edit the Caddy file to configure it. So first, we remove everything. Then we add the very limited configuration we need. comms.cloudcorrect.eu. That's our domain name that we want to use. Reverse proxy, which is the type of routing we want Caddy to do. And we point it at our Mattermost server. We write the file, we exit. Implied in this config is that Caddy should also set up HTTPS and make sure we have that kind of TLS protection in place. So we reload the Caddy service. This should let us visit the domain without setting the port 8065, and we should have HTTPS. So we open a new tab, comms.cloudcorrect.eu, no port, and we get it, complete with HTTPS. Our connection is finally secure. Lars@underjord.io. I want Lavik as my username. And I have a very secret password. So I create an account. Don't need to save it for now. So I can create a team. Hit underjord. Finish. And here we have Mattermost. I'll dismiss this welcome tour. I think it can actually be quite helpful, but not for this case. So we can chat all on our own. There are no other users in here right now. So use. And just for completeness, we can check out the boards and playbooks features. So this is the type of boards you have access to, where you can build out a Kanban style board. There's also the playbook feature, which, let's say we want to create a product release, and then it allows us to set up a bunch of to-dos that relate to that procedure in our organization. Pretty neat. I'd be curious to try it. There are then also team settings, managing members. And you also have the system console, which is pretty important if you want to change certain settings or control particulars about your installation. There's also a ton more to explore, so look around. But at this point, you can install the phone app, connect it on to this server, and just log in and use it from your phone. To invite more people, you can go here, copy the invite link. You can spread that around. If you want to be able to send invite emails and similar, you need to set up a mail provider. We don't do this in this particular tutorial, but it's pretty manageable to do. There are many additional things you can do when set up, and Mattermost provides a bunch of guides on administration, but this should, by all accounts, be enough to take for a very decent spin and figure out if it's for you. As you can see, there are really compelling alternatives out there. They generally exist just outside of the normal comfort zone, but if you have a program or a system operator that can set this up for you, it is typically very manageable. I hope this has made you curious to explore more options for your privacy, the privacy of your communications, and the privacy of your customer data. Big props to GleSYS for sponsoring this video and enabling me to do this. If you have needs for cloud or data center infrastructure in the Nordics, you should definitely check them out. I really enjoy working with them. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Stay curious out there.